let's start with the shift from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. Do you view that as significant in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the 2024 campaign?
I do in some ways. I expect there'll largely be continuity because the position that the Democratic Party has taken on guns does not exist in a vacuum. It is the product of what they think they can get away with in the public opinion environment. But there are some differences between Harris and Joe Biden. The first one is that she, at least thus far, has felt it a lot less important to say, I support the Second Amendment, but, than Joe Biden has. And that's one reason for that is that she actually doesn't support the Second Amendment. She filed an amicus brief in Heller all the way back in 2008, in which she and her co-signatories argued that the Second Amendment doesn't protect an individual right. Joe Biden has hinted that he thinks the same thing, but rarely. She's been more open about that. The second difference is she, and this is a low bar given Joe Biden's record, but has even less of a respect for the Constitution per se than Biden does. And she is someone who made the news in 2019 by laughing in Joe Biden's face on live television when he said that she couldn't ban AR-15s by executive order. She laughed and then said, let's say, yes, we can. Well, you can't. Joe Biden was actually right about that. You need congressional legislation and then almost certainly review by the Supreme Court. She doesn't seem to think that matters. She's also made comments at various points about doing other gun control by executive order, giving Congress 100 days or whatever to get its act together in her estimation and then to do it herself. If Congress won't act, I will, I think she said. So she does seem to have a more unilateralist approach than Biden did. And relative to other presidents, Biden's been pretty unilateralist on guns. I think we talked about this last time I was on your show. So those are the two sort of approach differences. And then on the details, back when she was running against Biden, she took a really out there position on modern sporting rifles, which was that she wanted a mandatory buyback. That's her Orwellian phrase, which essentially means that you don't have a choice. Your guns are confiscated, but you will be remunerated in some way for the confiscation. As far as I'm aware, and Stephen, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Biden's ever gone that far. I think his two ideas were to ban the sale of so-called assault weapons going forward. And at some point, he's floated the idea of adding those that were left behind to the NFA, the National Firearms Act. Right. I don't think he's ever mentioned confiscation, unlike her. But she's on a very short runway here before the election, and she's going to want to limit her vulnerabilities. So I would be surprised if any of those ideas or that sort of talk came up as part of her election campaign. What happens if she wins is a separate question.
Yeah, that's I think the first part I want to explore a little bit more, because you're right. Those are the big differences, I would say, between Biden and Harris on the issue of gun policy. Now, certainly Biden, like you mentioned, it's sort of a matter of degree with a lot of these things between the two of them. They largely agree on the kind of restrictions they want. They have some disagreement about how to get there, at least where this sort of limit is, because which is interesting in the sense that Biden's rulemaking, his executive action on restricting things like pistol braced equipped firearms or homemade gun kits, those seem like they're probably not going to stand up in the test of the courts after the Supreme Court struck down the Trump era bump stock ban, which was justified in very similar ways to what Biden has been doing. And Harris's main disagreement with him is that she thought they should go even further than those things. But yeah, and then the same thing with an AR-15 ban, an assault weapons ban, right? So-called assault weapons ban. It's more a matter of degree. They both want to ban them. They just have a difference of opinion on what to do with the tens of millions that are already in civilian circulation. And in both cases, Harris would be to the left of Biden. And yeah. But the question is, will she change course in this election, I think, to start off with? Because as you mentioned, I think there's good reasons why she might not. And if you look at what she's done in this extremely early stage, we're only less than a week into this. I guess when Reload members get this, it'll be exactly 1 week in. And when it goes public on Monday, it will be just over a week. And she's mentioned guns in her speeches and in her ad. The ad just talks about wanting to be free of gun violence, doesn't talk about policy positions. But she did mention 3 specific policies in her first 2 speeches. And those are basically what Biden has been running on: universal background check, red flag laws, and an assault weapons ban. She doesn't talk about the confiscation aspect of it, the mandatory buyback. So far, there hasn't been a shift. Do you expect to see a shift? And if not, why not?
No, I don't. The Democratic Party's aims on guns have been the same since around 2012-13. Barack Obama downplayed gun control until after Sandy Hook. He didn't even make a push for it after the Aurora, Colorado shooting. He then adopted 3 main policy proposals. One was to ban the sale of so-called assault weapons. Another was to limit magazines to 10 rounds. And the third was to achieve so-called universal background checks. And that has broadly been what the Democratic Party has wanted to do until about 2018, where we had the Uvalde abomination, and then they added red flags to the list. The federal role within red flag legislation tends to be limited to funding, but they still have more interest in it than do the Republicans. So those 4 things really are the aims. Kamala Harris, I mean, not to stray too far away from the question of the Second Amendment, but as a general matter, Kamala Harris has to be careful that what she brings to the Democratic Party as a replacement for Joe Biden isn't a lopsided loss. And I say that as somebody who thinks she can win, but the polls are close. They're 1-2 points between her and Joe Biden. The risk is that those 1 or 2 points are spread much less efficiently than Joe Biden's were in 2020. For example, there is just no great advantage for a Democrat in a presidential election running up the score in California or in New York, but doing worse in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, or Georgia. And if you are a party, as the Democrats are, that have made beating Donald Trump the main aim, you talk about it in eschatological terms, you are prone, I think sensibly given their rhetoric, to downplaying any more divisive policies that you might have, whether that be on firearms or fracking, in the hope that you can get through the blue wall in the Midwest. So I would be shocked if between now and the election, Kamala Harris staked out a position on guns that departed significantly or even at all from that Joe Biden has staked out and the institutional Democratic Party has staked out, because I think it will hurt her in those Midwestern states she needs to win.